All right, today we're going to be analyzing chapter one of The Awakening by Kate Chopin. And there's a whole lot that we learn in this first chapter. And so, really, we're just going to start with the very first line. Kind of an interesting way to open the novel. Chopin writes, "A green and yellow parrot, which hung in a cage outside the door, kept repeating over and over, allez-vous-en, sapristi, that's all right." He could speak a little Spanish and also a language which nobody understood, unless it was the mockingbird that hung on the other side of the door, whistling his fluty notes out upon the breeze with maddening persistence. So, these first lines, we open with this symbol of a parrot and a mockingbird. And the parrot is unable to be understood. He's speaking this language that no one can understand. The parrot's saying, go away, for goodness sake." And so already we have this theme of miscommunication or failed communication. And so that'll be something important to kind of keep an eye on. We also have the parrot in a cage. And so, of course, that's the theme of entrapment. So as we're reading, kind of ask yourself, who is this metaphorical parrot? What character do we see who is entrapped, who's failing to communicate, failing to be understood? And then, of course, we have the mockingbird, the only bird who can understand the parrot. And so ask yourself, who is the mockingbird in this story? Who is the only other person who can understand what the parrot is trying to convey? This caged parrot who is so entrapped and so alone in a lot of ways. Then, right after that, we meet Mr. Pontillier. We get a lot of characterization of Mr. Pontillier, both direct and indirect. We learn that he's 40 years old. We get some interesting kind of notes about him that maybe convey that he is a little bit impatient, maybe a little bit self-centered. Even when he is at one point lighting a cigar, it says that he let the paper drag idly from his hand. Even a note like that, even that kind of gesture of like letting something idly fall from your hand, conveys maybe a sense of carelessness, perhaps. And so we get a lot of that indirect characterization of him throughout these first few lines. Then we also meet a few other characters. His children are introduced. They are, pretty young, and they seem to be kind of an afterthought. They're 4 and 5 years old. A nurse is taking care of them, and so they aren't really central characters in this story. They're sort of forgotten about in a way. So that's an interesting note. There's also a woman in black who is mentioned, and it says that she's telling her beads. So this woman in black could be a nun, right? Nuns wear all black. They have rosary beads. Could be a widow, perhaps, wearing all black, having those rosary beads again. We're not really sure, but it's interesting that she's mentioned there. A lot of this novel is going to deal with the roles of women and what women went through during this time period. And so in some ways, the woman in black is sort of just a reminder that, spinsterhood, being a widow, being a nun, those are potential roles that women can have in this society if they aren't married the way that our protagonist, Edna Pontillier, is. So keep an eye on her. The woman in black just sort of lives at the fringes of the novel, but she does play an important role. So then after that, finally, we meet our protagonist, Edna Pontillier, and she arrives with Robert Lebrun. And Robert is the son of the owner of this resort that they're staying at. The resort is Grand Isle. It's just outside of New Orleans, and they're there for the summer. And so Robert and Edna come rolling in, laughing, having a good time. And they very much so are juxtaposed to Mr. Pontillier, who seems much more serious, much older in a lot of ways as well. And so that juxtaposition is immediately evident, even just in their demeanor and in the way they speak. So one thing we could kind of start to ask ourselves is Chopin setting up Mr. Pontillier and Robert Lebrun potentially as foils? We know that Mr. Pontillier is Edna's husband, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of real, true, genuine love or feeling there. Rather, Edna is having a great time with Robert, and he's much younger, closer to her in age. And so Robert and Mr. Pontillier do seem like they're being set up as foils in some ways. However, the way that Mr. Pontillier speaks about his wife, Edna, is pretty demeaning. Take a look at this line. He says, "You are burnt beyond recognition," he added, looking at his wife as one looks at a valuable piece of personal property which has suffered some damage. That is such a powerful line, right? That simile really conveys a whole lot about their relationship and the way that he views her as, I mean, it said it, a piece of property. Um, and so that is very interesting. And we'll learn a lot more about their marriage dynamic and what that has done to Edna's sense of self, and what that will mean for her kind of journey of self exploration. At the end of that paragraph, it says that he gives her back her rings, her wedding ring. And it says the rings sparkled upon her fingers, and he sent back an answering smile. This is talking about Robert. And so those wedding rings, again, are introduced as a really important symbol in the novel. So just kind of keep an eye on those. The wedding rings will reappear, and they'll be a symbol of that marriage duty that Edna has to her husband. Then from there, we kind of just read a little bit more about their interaction, and then we end with Mr. Pontillier going off to the club, and he will probably be there all night. He kind of, just abandons Edna to do whatever she pleases, and he says goodbye to his children, again, who are kind of just an afterthought, really, in this first chapter. So we learn a whole lot in these first few lines of the novel. A lot of themes are introduced, a lot of symbols and motifs, and we get a lot of characterization as well. So it's a powerful first chapter. It really does a lot, and hopefully it sets you up for an exciting reading experience as well. So good luck as you continue reading, and I hope you enjoy The Awakening.